So, uh, tell me basically what you've already done, you know.
Um, well, the book that I'm working on, this is like the third book I've worked on. So, my first book was like this one, and it was like mostly just like beginner stuff, like
Yeah. So do you? Okay. Let's see. Do you know scales?
yeah,
Okay. Do you know? So you know how to do the thumb under?
yeah,
Okay. Do you know chords?
some.
Okay. So I guess I just want to know if you did scales. You know, because if you didn't do scales, I
Yeah,
might.
I've done some scales.
Mhm. So, uh, which scales did you do roughly? Did you get into the black keys?
Um, yeah, I've done like some chords with the black keys, so like.
I mean, I'm already impressed.
So
Okay, so here's why. Have you heard of Chopin? Major important composer. Uh, he's from Poland. Do you know where Poland is?
Yeah.
Good. So, have you ever seen the movie The Pianist?
No.
Well, if you ever see it, he's the composer that's featured. So here's why I mention him. He's one of the most important people in the history of piano, and not just in writing music for the piano, but in actually discovering what's the best way to practice the piano, teaching people, all these kinds of things. So I have some disagreements with how people often teach things, beginner level things in school. And so I would get into little arguments with teachers and stuff until I found out that Chopin agreed with me. So here's the idea. They say C major is the easiest scale, right? Why is that?
I don't know.
Because it's got no black keys, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. When you're your age and you're learning scales and you're learning all the different black notes, it's like, oh well, G major has F sharp and D has F sharp and C sharp and which one, it's just overwhelming, So they stick with C because you don't have to like think about that at all, So so uh so the problem with that is what makes something easy conceptually. So when you're learning, oh, what is there this notes, is very different than what makes something easy physically. So the problem with C major is when you're playing it, it's all white keys, so it's easy mentally, but physically, you have to avoid the black keys. So you have to when you actually play and this isn't even advanced level stuff. Where advanced level pianists are playing stuff, they have to pull away from the black keys. So what happens is when you're playing all white keys, your hand kind of ends up being like this almost, and vice versa. When you're on the black keys, you kind of go up. So when you're playing the black keys, sometimes you kind of end up like this. But what Chopin believed is he thought the most natural position of the hand was just kind of like this, just kind of hang your hand out, so do both. Squeeze your fist, open up as far as you can, and then just go. When you play the piano, you want to be like that as much as possible because it's the natural shape. So put your thumb on E. So play it. Good. Just E. And your pinky on C. So play those two notes. So your outer fingers will play those notes what they're doing. So your middle fingers will play the three black keys. So what it is it's about 2 and 3. So it's about an even mix. So think the outsides are white and the inner ones are black. Now, Chopin taught this hand position because I'm getting a little bit closer so I can demonstrate. Because it's an even mix, but when you play it, it's a very like if you're ever wondering what's the best position of the hand, you should actually just play these notes and just feel what your hand feels like. Because it's the most natural position of the hand. So the exercise is this. So here's one of the big questions. So when you're playing piano and you're learning basic stuff, one of the biggest questions is if you're just playing a note, how much do you lift your finger? You know? Do you kind of just do this? So you just kind of, or do you like smack it up high, you know? And so do you use, and the answer is that you do them both sometimes. But, so the point of this exercise, what he did, and the way it was taught to me, is to do two major things. You want to learn the basic position of the hand, which is most natural, but you also want to learn how to move your finger in such a way that when you play, you're just moving your finger. Because what a lifetime of learning to play the piano is like, I'm trying to think, like, do you wear contacts? Have you ever done? If you ever learn to wear contacts, when you first do it, it's like, you have to like pull your eye open, you know? And so when you go like this, your eye wants to close. And it's awful, but eventually you just learn like how to touch your eye. And everything else, you still flinch when you touch your ear and your knee, but somehow you can just train yourself just to touch your eye, you know? So same thing with playing the piano. When you first start, and this is what I want to see if we can kind of allow this in this lesson. When you first start, you move your finger, you're going to move this, you're going to move this, you're going to move this, and your goal with this is to learn how to move just your finger, you know. So what I want you to basically do is you're on this position. I want you to just kind of do this kind of thing where you do. And the idea is the finger almost just goes like that, just like it's just being touched, and you're not moving anything else. So just try that really quick. And so pay attention that when you say do this, that these other fingers don't do that. You actually just move just that finger because it's going to be really difficult. Good. That was actually better than I expected. So, but this is what I noticed. So I did a little bit of beginning teaching in school, and one thing that I discovered with young people, enough to see that it is enough to see that it's a very common thing, I guess. Enough for me to think that it's not just a couple people learning something the wrong way. That it's like a process that everybody goes through, like their teeth falling out and stuff. You know, do you mind if I touch you to display things? So basically you tense up. And there are two spots that everybody tenses up. They are your wrist and they are your elbow. And some people do their shoulder, but it's not as common. But everybody and their mother tenses up there. So let's talk about the wrist. The wrist, you squeeze my hand. Imagine it's an orange or something. Okay? So you feel like what's squeezing when you do that? Like that you need to do. You need to have the part. So when you if you squeezed really hard, it would like start to hurt here. You know, that's what you need to do. You know, that's the part that you're supposed to use. Now, like squeezing a fist, like you're just like squeezing. You know, but I want your wrist to feel like so squeeze the fist. So you see how like the wrist like can't move, you know? So if you're at now it's tough to do that like you're doing at the piano, But basically, the big no-no is for your wrist to be locked. Because then when you, like, try to move my wrist up or down, you see how that part is ultra tense? Now try to move it. You see how it kind of goes? That's what you want. But you don't want to be so floppy that it's like, now move my wrist. Okay, it moves, but my hand is like jello, you know? Now try to move my wrist. You see how it moves some, but my hand is not like jello? So what you want is the part that squeezes like this, like you're squeezing an orange. What you don't want is the part that squeezes like a fist. This takes a lifetime to figure out. You're not going to figure it out immediately. If you get confused, don't worry about it. However, what is obvious is your elbow. Your wrist, your elbow should never be tense. So, what I always do with myself, mainly with myself when I'm practicing, and I've done it with people when I teach them, is call it the jiggle test. So what it is you basically just, what you did to me. So you'll be practicing a lot, and you'll be like, well, is it tense or not? And you're never going to know. And so what you'll do is you'll peel out, so say you're doing that exercise, let's say. You'll just kind of take one hand and put it on the wrist, and see if you can move it up and down. Because if you can move it up and down, it's not tense. And same thing with the elbow. If your elbow tenses up, you'll see. And so you'll be doing this exercise, or basically any exercise, and you'll go up to speed, and then you'll be like, oh my God, I'm going, it's tense. And you just pause or slow down and jiggle it until it's not tense. And then play. So let's go back to that position. See if you can find it. Looks like you're about on it. That looks good. So I'm just going to do the jiggle test on your wrist. You see, you already were tense and then it loosened up right away. Now it's hard, but you see? Do you see how it feels like you do this one thing and then the other just goes with it? All piano practice is just like, it's like you pressed a button and a string falls, you know, and you're just trying to figure out, how can I press this button without the string falling? Like, how can I take these two things that are like attached and just like not make them attached? So let's go slower until it's getting better. I'd say it's about 20% loose, 80% tense. Let's see if we can get to at least 50-50. Loose, 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 tensing a little bit, mostly loose, loose. That was about 60-40%. That was pretty good. Let's check the elbow. Oh God, it's super tense. Wow, that's gonna take a lot more work than the wrist. Try again. So, at your stage, don't concentrate on trying to figure out how to do your fingers right and the wrist and elbow right. Just pick one. So just pick and then think about your elbow the whole time. Or just pick and think about your wrist the whole time. So here's why. The other thing I want to do with your finger is this. Let me hold the finger for you. I want you to just sort of feel for like 5 or 10 seconds what this feels like. Because I'm forcing you to use your finger in exactly the right way. Now, so let me tell you why it's exactly the right way. You know joints? These things? You don't want these to collapse. So you see how I do this? How this one is collapsing? And you can do that with here. You want all the joints to be like, you want it to be firm. You want it to be one thing. That's the first rule. So you don't want this. So that's why when I was doing this, I was holding it for you, you know? And the other thing is this. People argue about this, but with this exercise, you want to learn how to touch like right here. So you want to learn how to touch with the point of the finger, right about here. Later, if you're playing, you have the option to either go a little bit further up, or sometimes you go more flat if you want to make it like a fat or a thick sound. But basically with this, you want to learn how to just, when you're doing this exercise, you want to learn how to use just the points, how for these joints not to collapse, and for when you move a finger, that the other fingers don't move. Because the point is, you want to learn how to do literally just that, just the finger. You know, so when you play the second finger, it's because later you use all these other things. You use your wrist, use your elbow, you use your shoulders, use your whole body. But at this level, you just want to say, what's the most basic element? What is just the fingers? And what's the best way to use them in the smallest way possible? So let's do just the second finger. I can't see. I need to go over here. All right, it's collapsing a little bit here. You see? So let me do it for you 3 times. Now do that. Good. That was perfect. The third one got a little bit floppy. Try one more time. Now try the third one. The third finger. Good. That's and what I want you to realize is when you do that, the sound kind of clicks. It's like, because when you start sort of letting the finger, the moment it hits, it will sound kind of muddy. It'll be like kind of like gelatinous. Do you know that word? Like jello? Yeah. Instead of like, so like, instead of, that's good. What you don't want is this. You want it to just like, I don't know if you've ever seen those like gears or that kind of technology where, and it's just like one thing just clicks like a train, like this clicks and then something else just goes, you know? So the other thing to learn, what's the weakest finger? Probably one of them, but let's pick another. The middle finger is the strongest finger, at least for me. Yeah, so the fourth finger. So here's the thing. How do I? Go to that position, lift your thumb, and just your thumb. Easy, right? Now lift your second finger and just your second finger. Easy. Now lift your third finger and just your third finger. Now lift your fifth finger and just your fifth finger. Now lift your fourth finger and just that finger. It's hard because the third finger goes with it, you know? So when you're doing this exercise, the thumb is on its own because it's fat, and you spend your whole lifetime making it not be as loud as the other fingers. 2 and 3 are easy. Then 5 is its own, but it'll take a long time to sort of, you'll have to learn how to press 4 and like, you can never fully unattach it from the third finger. But so let's hold this. I'll check your wristies. Go to that position, and just press 4 like this. Good. So now do 3 and 4 like that. Good. Yeah, that's extremely difficult. I would say like doing this 2 and 3, and then doing 3 and 4. What's called a trill later on. Like 2 and 3 on a scale of difficulty is like 2. And 3 and 4 on a scale of difficulty is like 10. It's like the hardest things are doing 3 and 4 like this, and then 4 and 5 like this. So, but you did that good the first time. So, do 1, 2, and 3 like this. Good. Now do 3, 4, and 5 like this. You see how hard it is?
Yeah.
It's totally normal. In fact, the same person I mentioned, Chopin, he has special exercises just for those. When you're doing this, always be aware this side of the hand is somehow much stronger than this side of the hand. But the problem is, when a lot of, at least in my opinion, when people are learning to play the piano, they basically just use their strong fingers, you know? They basically just try to use, they use 1, 2, and 3 most of the time, and they occasionally add in the 4th or the 5th finger. But the problem is, you have to get that stronger at some point, you know? So with the 3rd, 4th, and 5th finger, the other thing is this, you do this perfectly. There are 2 things you need to do. When you go from one key to the next, you want to play just one note at a time. But what the other thing you want to pay attention to is, you don't want to do this. So you don't want to have overlap. You want to learn how to do it as much like if they're gears like this. Where the exact one goes up later. So later you might start to do things in music like this, where there's a little bit of overlap, but you should never do that as your default. Do you know the word default? Default means, do you have a time you get up every day? What time?
Like 8.
Not bad. So that's your default time you wake up. You usually get up at 8, and then if at some days you get up at 10, and other days you get up at 4:30, the default would be, well, what time do you normally wake up? So your default should be like this. So the first time you did 3, 4, and 5, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th fingers, it was perfect when you did 1, 2, and 3. It was like this. But then when you did 3, 4, and 5, it was like this. Like they all held, you know? So do it really slowly, but see if you can do this. Good. So here's the other thing. So you have the 3 middle fingers, which are about as normal as they come, right? When you use the thumb, it's fat. It's a big lumbering piece of, you know. So when you're learning to play the piano, you're always trying to see how do you make the thumb less heavy. But on the other way around, the pinky, you were right, is the weakest finger. So there's always a kind of tendency when you use the pinky to use 2 things. You either use this whole muscle, which is really strong, or you kind of almost use the hand to go like to smack it like. So the point is, on the one hand, I'm trying to get you to use just the finger with this one, but if you could get a little bit of just like, you know, so just be aware that when you're doing this, the pinky, you're always allowed to cheat a little bit to get the clicky sound by kind of using those other. In the thumb, it's always going to be heavier, and it's not your fault because you can't do the standard things you do with the other fingers. So I think you understand. You see, when I asked you to do it where you made sure none of this collapsed and that it was just here, and so you got that piston that's like click, click, click. You did it perfectly. The only problem is at your stage, it's going to be too hard to concentrate on doing that and too hard to concentrate on keeping your elbow and your wrist loose. In fact, when you work on your wrist being loose, you're going to miss your elbow. And when you work on your elbow, you're going to miss your wrist. And when you're working on either of those, you're not going to be able to concentrate on your fingers. So if you practice this enough, just 10 minutes a day. Hell, just 5 minutes a day. Like, you could eventually get to the point where your default way of playing is for your fingers to not get gooey here, to hit just on the point, and for your wrist and your elbow to be loosed. Now, this is my disagreements with school, because in school, they have you learn as many scales as quickly as possible, all 12 or whatever it is, and 24. So, as fast as possible, but they don't do it they don't make sure you're doing everything right before you go along, so young people end up learning a lot of bad habits. So the big no-nos in piano playing really are a tense elbow and a tense wrist. because you can kind of do different things with your fingers and your hands, but if this is tense and this is tense, it does nothing but get in your way. It's like, imagine you're running, it's like quicksand, you know, it's like you're doing a motion that you could just keep going and you could fly, but it's just like this thing that causes you to just trip over yourself. And the other thing is when people who are really intense, if people are really tense here and they practice 5 and 6 hours a day, like these crazy people who really wanna, they get injuries, you know? So, let's see you do that exercise and do the jiggle test on your wrist with your other hand. So what you're going to do, what I want you to do is be like this, now use your other hand on your wrist, and what I want you to do, you know percentages, right? 20% of the time, 30% of the time. I want you to just like, so if you play for 10 seconds or 20 seconds, I want you every 3 seconds to just jiggle it for a second and be like, is it tense or loose? So it'll be like this. It'll be here. Is it loose? And the reason is you can't actually play piano if you're always up here and here. You need to just jiggle it a little bit just to see if it's tense, while at the same time. So the idea is, at the end goal, you want to be completely still. But if you're still, you can't check if you're tense. So you just need to jiggle it every few seconds and see if you are. So try it. It's pretty good. It's pretty, but do you see, because on the first or second time with all these things, when I asked you to do just one thing, you did it perfectly. When I asked you to first do the jiggle test with your wrist, it was like 60% better. Your elbow, you got tense right away. When we had you do just the fingers, you also got the pivot-like motion immediately. But when I had you try to do both of them at once, all of a sudden it was way more difficult. You see how that works? That's one of the craziest things in piano. And when teachers are trying to convince people to take music lessons, did I say teachers or teenagers?
Teachers, I think.
Okay. When teachers are trying to convince their kids to take music lessons, they always say, oh, it will help you learn other things in life. And then the parents will be like, oh, does it? You know? There might, if there is something that it helps you in other things in life, this might be what it is. Which is, if you do just this one thing, it's really easy. If you do just this one other thing, it's really easy. But if you try to do them both at the same time, all of a sudden, it's way harder. And you learn that the only way to learn is to do one thing at a time. Like right now, I'm trying to get my habits in order. I'm trying to get up in the morning because it's coronavirus and everybody's been lazy, you know? So sometimes I start getting up in the morning at the right time. But then if I do something else, a bad habit, like, I don't know, stay up late or watch TV for too long, it's like I can't get both of them in order at once, you know? Like that's really a thing. So just when you practice, think about that, you know? Think as you're concentrating to do this, what it feels like to concentrate on just one thing. And then when you add just one other thing to do that, what it does. Like, just like a glass. Think of like, okay, I poured in this water and that was perfect. And then you inch in just a little bit more and just a little bit more. But once you get right to here, all of a sudden it floods and pops and everything. Because that's what your head is like, you know, and that's what learning is like. And the one thing that's good about piano is you do learn how to kind of do inch by inch by inch by inch. And if you can learn to do that, that will help with other things. So, do the jiggle test with yourself. It's pretty good. So we're pushing 30. Your sister got a whole hour lesson because we were doing chords and stuff. So the only other bad thing that you're doing, oh, it's not me. Is you don't want to slap your hand. With piano playing, you don't do that. Like if your finger's here, you don't do this. So your hand is here and you're not pushing it down. What you're doing is you're using when you did just your fingers, it was good. But once you started checking your wrist, you were kind of starting to do this, like. You see how I'm saying? Like with this, you lifted the whole hand up and slacked it. You don't want to. You don't want to do that. You want to be holding your wrist. So I'll do the deal with this one. So another way to check is this. How old are you? Okay. You're 10. I'm bombarding you with tons of like advanced piano playing things. But if you remember, I said you have two options. With your fingers, you can either do just close to the key like this, or you can lift it up and smack it. That's the easiest way to tell if you are using your finger or if you're using your whole hand. Because you notice that you don't want to do this. So I'll hold your wrist for you. Now let's do it this way. Lift your thumb up real high and smack it down. Now lift the second finger up real high. Now smack it down. Now lift the third finger up real high. Oh, see, that was your hand. You see? Lift the third finger up. Now smack it down. Same thing with the fourth finger. Good. So that's how you make sure you're using just your fingers. So since we're about out of time, I want to see. Let's review the main principles. So what are the golden no-nos of piano playing? That aren't in your hand. I'll make it easier. Okay, I'm basically saying the golden no-nos of piano playing are a tense elbow and a tense wrist. Those are the golden no-nos of overall piano playing. Now when you look at your hand, these are the basic rules. You want your hand to just sort of be there, you know? Now the golden rules, so now with your finger, what are you paying attention to with your finger? Yeah, so this is the funny thing. Basically, when you want to do it right, it's basically that. It's just going like that. But learning to play piano is about learning how to not do things wrong. So the things that you could do wrong are you could let these joints collapse, or you could hit too flat. Because you never want to do like this. You can later kind of do like this, but you want this to be the normal and this to be something you choose to do sometimes. But you never want to go like especially there, you never want to do that. So that's normal. So with the finger, it's you don't want these joints to collapse, and you want these joints to collapse. You want to hit right on the point, and you want it to be just the finger that does. So let's review all the main principles again. So let's see what are the things not to do? All of them.
Keep your elbows loose.
Yeah, in your wrist. And with your finger, what do you want to not do?
Not put them flat.
Yes, and?
Not bend it
Yeah, basically. The word is joints. So you know how you have, this is a joint, this is a joint, and this is a joint. So the idea is you have three, for whatever reason, we have three halfway spots in our finger, which divide our finger up. And what you're trying to do when you play the piano is you're trying to take all the weight from wherever it is, your shoulder, whether it's your shoulder down, whether it's your elbow down, whether it's your wrist down, but you're trying to have all the weight transferred to the finger. So if it's cut off at any of these points, so the only way to make it like a direct line that it transfers is if the finger is like one thing. So if any of the joints collapse, this thing, it's like imagine a person who had like a wooden leg, like a pirate, you know? It's like, it would be like if that wooden leg, which serves the whole function of like putting his whole body's weight to the ground, it would be like if they took this part of the leg, like the whole middle third of it, and just it just cut out, you know? It's like the leg would become useless, you know? So, I think you did pretty, so this is boring. This is not music, you know? But these are the most important, all the things which are the most important technical concepts of really playing piano, almost generally, when I had you do them right, you did do them perfectly. The thing is, time will tell if you can practice on your own, make sure they're there. Let's just do the jiggle test a couple more times. That's big. I'll jiggle your elbow, you jiggle your wrist, and you do that. See, it's hard. So just be aware when you're doing that, your tendency with your fingers is with you. I've taught enough people to know that it's really different each time. Your tendency with your fingers, you don't collapse the joints that much, but you start to go flat here, and then you start to kind of smack with your hand instead of using. So what you want is this. And so where does that come from? That really is going to feel the most like here. And if you do it really well, you'll start to feel, if I can see your hand, you'll start to feel it like kind of here. Like when I was really developing my fingers, if my practice was good, I knew it hurt like here and here. You know? So yeah, the main things you're doing wrong are you go a little bit flat like this, and you kind of push it from your hand instead of from the finger. Your joints are pretty good. So that's about it for that. I think, yeah. So I think we're about finished.